veterans will all have a part to play, to build, to serve, and if necessary, to fight. Well, thank you very much indeed. It is a great pleasure to be here and to be in the banqueting house. Last year, Tony explained that our analysts argue that there is only a remote chance of a significant direct attack or invasion by Russia on the UK. Remote, in this context, still means an up to 5% risk, and that only refers to the UK. The world's largest crowdsourcing forecasting site, Metaculus, suggests that there is a 16% probability Russia and any NATO member state are in direct conflict by 2027. Today, the UK is subject to an onslaught of cyber attacks from Russia. And we know that Russian agents are seeking to conduct sabotage and have killed on our shores. But Russia's hard power is growing quickly. The Russian armed forces are now more than 1.1 million strong, consuming more than 7% of GDP and around 40% of government spending, which is a sum that has more than doubled over the past decade. While I've argued that Russia's campaign in Ukraine has so far been a strategic failure, with NATO bigger, more united, stronger, and spending increased amounts on rearmament, we should be under no illusions that Russia has a massive, increasingly technically sophisticated, and now highly combat experienced military. But it is absolutely clear that Russia's hard power is something to fear. But what about Russia's intent to use it? The war in Ukraine and Russia's track record shows Putin's willingness to target neighboring states, including their children and civilian populations. The Russian leadership has made clear that it wishes to challenge, limit, divide, and ultimately destroy NATO. In former President Medvedev's words, aspiring to the disappearance of Ukraine and the disappearance of NATO, preferably both. Despite these clear indications, I'm not sure yet that we feel this threat in the UK as acutely as many of our allies in Europe. As the philosopher Nietzsche said, where we stand depends on where we sit. I spoke recently to the Danish ambassador here in the UK. Over the past few years, she served in Estonia, then Sweden, and now in London. She described how viscerally the threat was felt in Estonia, and then how she saw the issue grow in prominence when she was in Sweden. Now she's in London, she observed that these discussions are generally confined to people like us here tonight. So these arguments can cut through. It is clear to our allies that the risk to NATO and to the UK from Russia is growing. In reality, other than proximity, the threat in the UK isn't really any different to the threat in Germany, for example. And unless we're able to raise awareness and stimulate the conversation with society about the risks, we can't expect the rest of government, society, and industry to act or bear the costs. But this can't be just a conversation about risk. We also have to explain how we should respond. Our objective must be to avoid war. However we choose to define the cost, whether that is in lives lost, misery, or economic impact, war is enormously costly. And I know I don't need to tell this audience that while the price of peace may be rising, the cost of strong deterrence is still far, far less than the cost of war. Sons and daughters, colleagues, veterans will all have a part to play, to build, to serve, and if necessary, to fight. And more families will know what sacrifice for our nation means. That's why it's so important that we do explain the changing threat and the need to stay ahead of it. As I've said, I'm clear that the country's first line of defence is the armed forces. We need to be ready to deter, fight and win today and tomorrow. The SDR has given us our orders. As it says, we are in a new era of threat, and that demands a new era for UK defence. We need to end the hollowing out of our armed forces and lead in a stronger and more lethal